It's the Sod Pod, brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod. Hello, and welcome to the Sod Pod. This is episode 24. If you actually include our prequel episode, this is actually our 50th show since the starting of the Sod Pod. Who would have thought we're still going? And we still have a fist of listeners as well. I'm joined this morning here with John O'Loughlin, Edward Healy, Claire Costigan, and Owen Quinn. Johnny, we're going to throw the ball straight at you. What are we going to chat?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We're going to chat a bit about minerals. So I suppose there's going to be an awful lot of talk about winter housing and minerals, and we've covered that in great detail ourselves. But the one thing that I suppose we need to be very conscious of is minerals and supplying sufficient minerals into stock that are housed there now. And I suppose, Jim, when you look at it, second cuts were poorish quality, and the mineral content is going to be adjusted by that as well. And then there's lots of different challenges then on farm, like in relation to feed space, and there's lots of different ways of feeding minerals on farm is the first thing, I suppose, first place to start. So I suppose when you go down through them, you have powder mineral, which a lot of dairy farmers will be using. You have boluses. I suppose the thing about boluses is that you can only put kind of mainly trace elements. You can't put in the macro minerals, because if you were to put the quantities of minerals into a bolus, it'd be about the size of a rugby ball that you need. Mm-hmm. So you're only kind of covering off trace elements there with a bolus, but they do definitely have a place to play. They've used quite commonly with sheep. But I suppose your macros there, your magnesium and your phosphorus, they're the kind of big ones that are hard to get enough of a quantity in a bolus. Then you have buckets. I suppose the buckets, they generally contain a good bit of molasses, so to kind of sweeten them. Yeah. And sometimes you're kind of, you're getting molasses for your money by times. And then I suppose we have the mineral blocks, and I suppose we have a big range of mineral blocks ourselves. And I suppose what's unique about them, Jim, is that they're sodium based. So sodium's a really important mineral for cows and stock in general. And I'm sure the lads will cover in a little bit more detail going later on this, but they also have advantages in that I suppose the main thing with the minerals, the sodium-based mineral block, is that the animals can have only a fixed appetite for sodium. So as you often say, Jim, you're feeding the need and not the greed. And the thing about that is that they can't over-consume the block because they've only defined appetite, and they're getting the blocks are formulated based on, a pre-carbon diet or, a high phosphor breeding time, so that you have the right quantities of minerals and trace elements for the different stages of the lactation or dry period or the growth stages or of a growing animal as well. So I suppose, listen, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and the farmers are all using different methods, and some of them are using a combination of methods. What a lot of farmers might do as well is that they might use bag minerals and then supplement with blocks as well. Yep. Just to cover off all angles. And a lot of farmers just using the blocks alone as well. So there's a huge variety of different systems that are being employed, and there's merits to all of them.
Yeah, exactly, Johnny. And Owen, you've been doing a lot of work there up in the 6 counties as well on blocks. Like, what sort of stories are you finding up there? What's working?
Yeah, look, just to touch on a few points John made there. Look, there's certainly a lot of ropey enough silage floating about, depleted quality of it. So obviously then the breakdown of it's not just going to have the same power in it. And yeah, so maybe just farmers are picking up on maybe behaviours that maybe are slightly more out of the norm. Maybe cows maybe behaving in manners that wouldn't just be as normal. Maybe someone to pick up on your own farm might be looking out for a pica. So if you're happening walking up the house and you see cows behaving differently, maybe making an attempt to consume inanimate objects that don't really have any nutritional value, whether it be a plastic drinker, it might be the rubber mats, they might be just licking urine off the floor. Those types of things would automatically signal pica. Now, the funny thing about pica is that it can actually be caused by probably one of 3 things. It can be acidosis, it can be a lack of sodium, or it can be a lack of phosphorus. Phosphorus is really, really important, particularly in dairy cows, for just metabolizing energy. So really, if you think about it, if the phosphorus is low, it's going to knock production. One of the first things that the cow will sacrifice will be a reproductive end of things. So in the north, we would really, the cow doesn't get much of a rest. If she's calved in, you're really trying to hit her on her next cycle to try and get her back in calve. So you're expecting a lot from that cow. She's on her peak, she's up at her peak yield, and automatically then you're trying to get her back in calve. So that jag of phosphorus is really going to try and sustain that. On the other side of things then, John touched on was the sodium. I think it's very important that sodium sometimes can get overlooked. It's really, really important, particularly for high yielding cows, that they're losing a lot of sodium through the milk. Not so much now. In the summertime, they'd have been losing a lot of sodium through sweat, things like that, particularly during those couple of very excessive heats and things like that. But sodium is sometimes considered the third most vital element for life. The first being oxygen, the second water, and the third sodium. The reason for that, if you were to break down your animal, whatever your enterprise, if it's beef or dairy, break down that animal, they all have the same cells. And in every cell that makes up that animal, there are sodium potassium pumps. So basically, they're regulating the amount of water that gets in and out of the cells. They're used for nerve signaling. And so really, that's why they have that appetite for sodium, and they will regulate themselves. So yeah, sodium is very, very important. The one thing that I would say, the block that the grassland guys that are going to be fit to get onto farm, when you think of your pica, your acidosis, your phos, your sodium, take the phos block, for example, that we provide, it's actually going to hit every single one of them. So no matter, you might need to be able to quickly identify what's causing the issue on my farm. But if you can hit the acidosis with the calcium, you're hitting the desire for, or the appetite for the sodium, and then you're hitting the phos. So look, it's just maybe this time of year when you've housed the cows, keep an eye out for those sorts of things, and maybe even cod balls again, just to try and watch out for stomach problems as well, James.
No, that's critical there, Owen, in fairness. I think as well, when you take sodium, it's a real carrier. It's so essential for the absorption of minerals, and that's why, as you say, it's often overlooked, because we get hung up on phos or zinc or copper or whatever it is. But if life was that easy, we'd just be able to overdose on those. But it's the all-in package, really,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sometimes it can be actually quite hard to keep cows covered. I'll tell you a wee quick story from my own point of view. It could be 4 or 5 years ago now, but the cows in the home place there, they took a particular liking to the rubber matting that lined the front of where the cows exited the parlour, and they would started maybe licking at it. Then eventually one of them might have got their tooth into it, and eventually then they were fit to get a chunk out of it. So really, that's a really, really abnormal behaviour, maybe a bit of an extreme, but really it was maybe one of two things. It was maybe sodium or it was acidosis. But when that type of behaviour, just to put it frank, it's not normal. And if you're picking up on those types of things, there's a want there for something. Now, just put it into context, that particular batch of cows were getting a bagged mineral through the TMR, and they were also getting a fairly high level of minerals through the nut, and they still weren't covered. Okay. Now, while it was sodium, while it was phos, we quickly got on top of it. But yeah, just watch out for those behaviours and pick up on them.
And Claire, your main base is right down on the southern part of the island. You're knocking around Waterford, and obviously you're reaching out there as well. And what sort of stuff are you seeing there?
Yeah, again, so I suppose cattle are in these days. They're in earlier this year, and as John was mentioning, like the quality of feed could be a little up or down because of the tricky nature of the season, the summer season that we had this year. So, when you're looking at your feed, the quality of the feed going into the animals mightn't be as good as you would have liked, just because of the weather and everything. So that will have an impact on your minerals. So the amount of minerals you might think that's in your silage might be a little off this year. Again, if it's a little acidic or high in nitrates or anything, again, it's going to upset maybe the stomach. It's going to upset the rumen of the animal. So I suppose for me, going around or listening, it would be like you'd be walking into cubicle sheds and you could be seeing cut balls, which would be an indication of poor rumination in the animal. And we've seen a lot of it this year. Again, so that'd be an indication of rumination. So you'd be of poor rumination. So you'd be looking at trying to correct that, whether that be through trying to get in, say, your calcium or pH buffer, or again, you could try put in some straw, try to get some fiber in there, try to slow down that rumen and try to get it back up and working. Like if the rumen isn't working, it's not going to be able to absorb those nutrients. So you're automatically going to be then down the line, you're going to be, first of all, your rumen's not going to be working, then you're going to downstream into maybe deficiencies in minerals because the minerals and your diet is not being absorbed correctly. But maybe first of all looking at the rumen, and maybe signs of that is the cut balls in the cubicle sheds, or scouring, or just different things that would suggest that the animal, as owners mentioning there, is just a little off. And I suppose other things as well this year, in terms of deficiencies, maybe a little less, the cows and cattle have been in earlier, but the weather has been fairly warm up to this, so sheds are going to be a little warmer, so they're going to be a little bit susceptible to maybe pneumonias or something. Again, it's all about your immune system, and if they're lacking in minerals that contributes to a healthy immune system, again, it's going to be a little bit more easier for them to catch pneumonia in the sheds. So it could be an air ventilation, but if their minerals up to scratch or up to the levels the animals require, it could prevent them actually catching pneumonia, So minerals have an awful lot of different angles to play in. And I suppose it's trying to keep on top of it, which is not always easy. So I suppose that's where putting in your blocks or just having your insurance policy there. The animals also have access to whatever minerals, and they know themselves, that we're talking about earlier with the sodium, and be able to self-regulate themselves.
That's great, Claire. Edward, you're looking itchy-footed there now. There's a big statement coming.
I don't know if there's a big statement coming or not, James, but I think just following on from what Claire said there, every animal that you're feeding is going to have a different requirement, depending on the breeds, the size of the animal, the age of the animal. An animal going into their second lactation is going to have a different requirement than an animal going into their fifth lactation, and I suppose it's not really a one size fits all treatment, really. So it's very important that, I suppose, when you're looking at minerals are one of probably the best investments that you can make, especially in that pre-calving period, because really what you're looking at in that pre-calving period, it's not just for calving down the cow and getting a nice calf out of it. You're looking to try and get that animal set up for the next lactation. And look, there's a load of things that can actually influence that next lactation. It's going to be obviously forage quality, body condition score. It's a couple of those things that we mentioned in the last couple of podcasts, but I think minerals is something that has to be really looked at, and something that can't really be skimped on. Animals are all going to have different requirements, and it's all going to have to be tailored to the individual,
Exactly, Ed. And I suppose, this year and every single year, we're constantly chasing, higher outputs. So in terms of your dairy cow, we want those high yields, we want those high solids. And the higher outputs the cows have, like you're saying, there's going to be a higher requirement on those minerals drawn off that milk. Yeah, very, very important point that I suppose so you're making, that every single animal is different. And then again, their production and how they're going to be, what level of production they're at, is also going to play a big role in those minerals as well.
The dry cow is a big one, isn't it, really? That's it. We've probably said it maybe 2 or 3 times now, but the dry cow probably is the most important cow on the yard, isn't it? We don't realise that during that period, that cow, we're probably expecting a lot from her. At the end of the day, about 70% of the calf growth takes place during that dry phase. The cow, she's going through a lot of changes. She's basically trying to get renewed. She's trying to renew the line of her mammary gland. So there's a lot going on, and at the same time we're trying to get a good calf going with a lot of colostrum. So really trying to mitigate against those challenges that, say, you're getting into your calving season, a small problem, but it's multiplied up over whatever number of cows, becomes a big problem. So maybe taking a wee step back and looking at, right, how am I supplementing that dry cow? We touched on it. Maybe dry cows don't just go into the best of housing, say feed space. If say you're opting for the bagged mineral, maybe looking at this, is it a case whereby every cow's actually getting a chance to consume, say, the right amount? So there's a lot nearly been left to chance. Is it a case whereby, right, could I introduce a bit of an insurance policy? whether it's a block or a different form that I know I'm covered. I suppose the unique thing that Claire was touching there in terms of acidosis, one thing that will stand against, say, a block or a mineral that's consumed by the mouth, is that I didn't really realize this until maybe a while back, that a cow or an animal, they have actually a great mechanism of dealing with acidosis naturally. So whenever you introduce the block and there's maybe slabbers flying left, right, and centre, saliva is actually full of sodium bicarbonate, and that's the animal's natural way of actually buffering the stomach. So that's one thing to watch out for, that if you're feeding a block or feeding a lick, that's a real benefit that you mightn't actually realise that's happening in the background.
Now, we've caused a bit of controversy this year in Grassland Agro. We have rebranded internationally our full block range, right? So obviously, there's probably not a farm in the country that didn't know the Kelsey block range, right? But I suppose we've now rebranded with different names. That's straightforward enough now that we've got a handle on it. But let's be realistic. There's lads out there that call them the T-Mac block and the French lick, and the Grassland boys have the wall holder things there, right? So it'll be all fine. But I think it's worth referencing here our new range, which is broke down into 3 subcategories: Lunio, yeah, I said Lunio, CTA, and Spadia. But under Lunio, we have Lunio Precarver and we have Vital Phos. So there's our Precarver block and our Phos block. Under CTA, we have Immocopper, Protect, and Oven Zinc. Okay, so in old money, that's our copper block and it's our zinc block and it's our Nutri V5 garlic based block. And under the third category of Spadia rumen, right? So that was our digest block. Brilliant for the rumen function and all those things Owen just mentioned. And we have Fix-N, which is our Calci Mag. Now, but the beauty of that whole range that we have, right? It's all about self-regulation. And it's, as John said earlier when he listed off our full list of bullet points in the opening 5 minutes, it's all about feeding that need. There's always an issue with the bag mineral. We throw it out there. And with that bag mineral, we end up in a situation where I suppose the bully boy syndrome can kick in and certain stronger, more headstrong animals can consume more of the mineral. And that's why these blocks knocking around in the holding areas and in the sheds and in the fields when we're out there gives every animal a chance to get that supplementation in. Also, Owen, you referenced salivation. That's a critical function for that rumen, but also our blocks are, well, for James Freeman at 5'9", our blocks are up at my head height, right? So that allows the cow, the neck reaching up to get that lick and we get that slobbering. But the beauty of that salivation, it's also bringing the mineral intake direct into the bloodstream super fast as well, you know. The big thing about mineral blocks and why we stand out from the crowd, it's not really the mineral makeup that's in the block. I often look at the blocks and that's the 4th point of the block, in my view, because obviously we've got our own specialist technology in it. We've our Calci Grit, so the Calci Grit, and that's our calcified seaweed, okay? Then we also have the IoTech, which is the extract from the brown seaweed as well, right? These are 2 patented technologies that we have. We might have a quick chat on them. We have the sodium base then, that's your regulator, that's the measure, and that's that vehicle to carry the minerals into the animal. And then what I call mineral matching. You know, so under each block, we have a certain level of minerals within it to match the need of that animal. But to me, that actually comes forward. And sometimes we can get caught in reverse going, oh, I have a phos deficiency. I must get a phos block. But it's all the other pieces that allow that full mineral range to hit its source as well. With the whole rebrand, and obviously we're rolling out our posters across the network. They're showing up in trades all over the country now as well. It's actually gone down very well at farm level. We're getting huge feedback from it. They're liking it. Obviously, the Phos block, big red label stands out in the Precarver with its blue. It's gone down quite well. It's been interesting. It's been a great conversational topic as well. But what are we seeing out there, guys, when you're looking at the different setups? And, of course, John O'Loughlin would have been instrumental back there a few years ago in redesigning some of our holders as well to make them easier for the farmer to use and create more options, like the gate hanger and like the field spike. So we've kind of seen a different angle, making the life that bit easier for the farmer to put more of the mineral supplementation in front of their animals.
Yeah, so look, I suppose we have a couple of different options depending on whether animals are actually out, they're in housed in sheds, or whether they're actually out in the field. We would have always had the wall holder, and to be honest, for me, when animals are actually housed in the shed, like the wall holder is a super option, because it's up, it's out of the way. It means that the block always falls. The heavy side will always fall to the front, so as the animal is licking, the block will stay spinning. But what you said there a couple of minutes ago, James, was absolutely key there, because that block is actually up that 5.5 foot or 6 foot, or just over the height of the animal's back. Mm-hmm. It actually encourages them to lick up rather than lick down. So really, what you're trying to use is that saliva, encourage that salivation that's actually going to go back down the animal's throat rather than out on the floor. And really, that's, whether you're talking about humans or whether you're talking about animals, it's that saliva that works as a buffer in the stomach to actually keep that pH where it needs to. So the wall holder is still a key part of how we actually use that product and keep the rumen function working properly. But in fairness to John, some of his ideas are slightly out there some of the time, but he got it right there, in fairness, now when he when he did a bit or made a couple of modifications to the block holders. Like, so look, he did a great job, in fairness, now with the gate hanger. So John, with the engineering skills that he has, was able to make brackets or design some brackets there that actually bolt onto the wall holders, and guys actually find them very, very useful, especially when you're talking about calving areas or calf sheds, or anywhere that there mightn't have been a straightforward wall to actually stick the wall holder on. Like, so look, on the housing end of things, I think the blocks are very, very well covered, and there's really not many places now that they can't go now between the wall holder and the gate hanger. Obviously, look, we have some great options there outside for out in the field as well. And I don't know, a couple of the owner player might talk through the options that are out in the field there, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Ed, so I suppose again in the out in the field, I suppose the big thing is with our block holders, or spike holders for the fields, is it's keeping them up. Again, in the field, if you're going out with licks or they're down on the ground, or buckets, they're down on the ground, you're not getting that optimum benefit of salivation and getting it down, trickling down through the throat. But then also, you might have the concern of maybe a bit of TB or a bit of badgers floating around on the ground. Whereas with the spike holders, where to put them in and keep them up out in the field, is also very, very beneficial. It's just keeping it high, keeping them away from other wildlife animals that could potentially bring in other diseases that was very much unwanted. While also keeping that block open, as you're saying, keeping the salivation going. And again, I suppose walking in and walking out of footpaths for cows. Again, if there's any gates hanging, you'll be able to hang them on gates. And then if there's any spikes or posts, you'll be able to place them on those as well. So again, the cover for the field also very, very well, I think.
I suppose the majority of cattle, well, you'd have thought it would have been housed now, but I suppose at the same time, out wintering's got quite common as well, hasn't it? Guys keeping cattle out in Keel and that sort of thing. So definitely those types of cattle there, likes of a Foss block of that, keeping them covered, it's going to be very, very useful. So, no, look, the block rebrand's going really well. They look the part, but James, just to sort of touch on what you're talking about there, yeah, it's the exact same technology that's there. I like to think of the three S's. So your sodium, your seaweed, and then a well-balanced supplementation, So the blocks now, they are fairly well-balanced in terms of their macros and their trace elements. But just, I suppose, when you look at the seaweed, yeah, you're right. What we're kind of be trying to do is let the animal look after itself, okay? So basically, you're talking about your seaweed. There's two forms. The calcigrit, to create a simple analogy, it creates a home within the gut for the microbes to live in. And the Neotech, I like to think of it as a bit like a cup of coffee. Gives them a bit of a jag, gives them a bit of a boost, keeps them thriving. So to me, that's 50% of the block, keeping the stomach right, and then balancing it balance the minerals after that. That's the whole secret. But the big challenge is, I suppose, James, that animal has. It's hard enough to keep on top of it. It's changing that much the whole time. It changes between the years. It's between the breeding and the feeding. You're going to be working your way through a pit of silage. It's going to change 20 times what you're feeding. So really, how do you keep on top of that and, make a complicated story simple? I suppose just try and let the animal look after itself and keep them covered. That's the whole secret, really.
Yeah, exactly. As I'm very comfortable with what we've discussed here today. Anyone got any final thoughts? Anything we've missed? Anyone got a favourite mineral?
Cheers. What a question.
Sodium.
Oh, man. I think we have covered that well. That's to me your vehicle.
I suppose I'd go with phosphorus then, because it's such a demand.
God. Oh,
Yeah.
Lord. Wait, David Corbett is going to appear on this one as well now, is he?
I think so, yeah. Taking his spot.
What's your importance of phosphorus? Go on.
I suppose it's tricky, I suppose, even get it up into the crop first of all, and then there's such a demand on it within the animal from reproduction to production. There's such a need for phosphorus and such a draw on phosphorus. But I suppose, when you're talking about phosphorus, and you mentioned David there, it's all about trying to get it out of the soil and up into the plant, which is a very tricky thing. And you can be even in high indexes of phosphorus and you still not get enough phosphorus. And that's where, you're looking at the whole picture. Similar to blocks, we're looking not just at minerals, we're looking at the whole picture in terms of animal health. Similarly with phosphorus, to get that up into the plant and then into the animal, you're looking at the whole picture between soil and plant interaction and soil health. But it plays such an important role in animal reproduction, really. And it's become such an important thing. I think Eoin mentioned pica there earlier, phosphorus deficiency, and it's becoming more and more prevalent on farmers because we're pushing our animals. We want to get the best out of these animals. That in turn means that we're going to be, asking more of the minerals and taking more minerals from the animals, and we just need to be able to replace them.
What's really interesting, Claire, as well, is the fact that I read an article recently. The overall sale of phosphorus is actually down across the country this year. So if we've been struggling to get phosphorus up into the plant anyway, that's probably going to be exacerbated or made worse.
Yes.
James, I'm going to give you an answer now that a politician would be proud of. And what I'm going to say now is that I don't have a favourite mineral because they're all important. Right.
Oh, Edward.
And what I will say is that all of the minerals are interlinked in that one compound that's going to antagonize another one, and being low in one can lead on to other deficiencies in other areas, so probably being a little bit political here and might be causing a bit of controversy here on the sod pod. But look, I think it's important that minerals are looked at on a whole, and there's no one size fits all when it comes to them. So it's every animal is going to have a different requirement. Every farm is going to be slightly different. Every forage or every feed is going to be slightly different. That's on farm as well. So minerals need to be looked at on a case by case basis, really, and it's something that just needs attention because it's something that has the potential to cause a lot of issues on farm.
You've actually just nailed why our mineral block range is so important. You've actually just nailed it in one. It's not a one-shot hit here with one mineral. It's the absolute balance going down through it. Now, my favourite mineral, which is hard to go after you, Ed, saying I shouldn't have a favourite after me starting this whole shenanigans, is magnesium. And the reason I like magnesium, it's a bit like me. It's very, very important. It does way more than what people realise. But by God, is it unbelievably temperamental and in many cases very unpalatable as well. So magnesium can be tricky to get into the animal, but it has such a key role for anti-stress and bone development, and it just gives such even lameness, you know what I mean? Like, it's got such a measure across the range as well. So if James Freeman was a mineral, he'd be magnesium. Highly unpalatable.
Come on, James. This, no, they must be brave enough to say that to you, but fair play.
We'll wrap it up. Mind yourselves out there. Farm smart, farm safe.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.